I swear we were going to do some version of this, but now Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race for 2024. Bryan Curtis is here from the Press Box. We've been working together forever. Tara Palmeri is here. She hosts the Somebody's Gotta Win podcast for us. She also writes for Puck News. She's doing a great job covering the election. I'm going to start here. Curtis, craziest 4-week stretch of politics since you've been alive?
Yes. I think I'm pretty good on saying that. I mean, it's been 3.5, right, since Biden tanked the debate.
Yes.
Maybe the wrong word to use on the Bill Simmons podcast, but Biden had a bad debate.
Right.
Then we have the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. And now here we sit that Joe Biden is dropping out of the race in such sudden fashion that the news anchors didn't even have somebody ready to talk about it. I think Tara and I were both on the list of people they were about to call if, the backup to the backup to the backup didn't pick up the phone.
I think Bakari was ready. He was just in a suit all day, just in case. I saw him on CNN really fast. Yeah, you in that 4-week stretch, you left out. So the debate's on June 27th, complete chaos. Biden goes on the hot seat. That's the next few days. The Democrats start turning on each other, which Tara's been covering nonstop. Then Trump, the assassination attempt, which is 8 days ago and feels like it was 17 weeks ago. We get all the conspiracy theories, all the worst of the internet immediately pops out. We get, is Biden now in or out? Was he going to be out or not? We get Trump picking a VP and all of a sudden the convention. We get the speech, we get the in or out stuff with Biden, and then today we get Biden dropping out. Were you surprised, Tara?
I just knew it was a matter of time. I was warned by my sources, if this is a war between Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, she will win. She is a true knife fighter, and this may be death by 1,000 cuts, but he will end up falling. And I was talking with a senior Hill source who's kept me really up to date from the highest levels. And they were it just became unbearable, too many straws on him. And, he just, as in the last straw, it was just too many, and he had to. And so it was more delay tactics. And I would never say that COVID was a delay, but it gave him a few more days. And then, he wanted to meet with Netanyahu, who's coming to Washington this week, because he really does believe in his heart that he is one of the strongest leaders on foreign policy. So this would give him another opportunity. His wife is going to, for the First Lady, Jill Biden, is going to Paris for the opening of the Olympics. It just felt like they were choosing one event after another to keep this going. And you had Chuck Schumer go to Delaware about a week ago and tell him hey, it's time to get out. And I was told that if he didn't drop out soon, it was going to get increasingly uglier this week. And I'm talking about electeds on the Hill continuing to come out against him. He had 10 in just the past weekend. Senators like Sherrod Brown, John Tester of Montana. It was just going to become a flood because Nancy Pelosi was not there anymore to stop the leaks. And neither was Schumer. They were just do what you must, go for it. And Biden was under siege, and he doesn't make decisions very quickly. He had his back up against the wall. He was in his bunker. He was furious, thinking that this was all orchestrated by Obama and Pelosi. May not be completely off on that one, but eventually I think he realized the damage was done. If you can clip so many ads off of the members of his own party saying he shouldn't run, actually I really think though this morning that poll in Michigan, that public poll showed him 7 points down from Trump in a head-to-head race. I mean, I don't think that's recoverable. And you need to win Michigan, you need to win, or Pennsylvania. You need the blue wall as a Democrat to win. If you've lost that, it's almost impossible. So I do think that Michigan poll may have been exactly the data he was looking for.
I had the same reaction. That was the first thing I woke up to today, West Coast time. And I was one of the first things I saw. And I was like, ooh, 7 points. That's a lot. Bryan, Tara had on her podcast a few days ago. So one of the things she mentioned on her podcast a couple of days ago, Bryan, was that the recourse the Democrats had if they wanted to get Biden out was just to leak everything. And we already had somebody videotape the Zoom, which somebody had got the actual video recording of the thing. And it hits the point where any conversation he has with basically anybody outside his very tight inner circle is just going to get leaked because they all want him out. Can you ever remember because you for us, you span sports, you span culture, you span politics. Can you ever remember a situation like that where somebody was in charge, literally everyone around him was a leak threat?
It's been pretty amazing. I mean, look, politics, as Tara be the first to tell you, there's a lot of sources that are on background and necessarily on background. But what's been so interesting is the Schumer meeting that she mentioned, right? It doesn't really get the job done face to face. So then a couple of days later, we hear about the Schumer meeting. And that is the way to get the job done, right? It's not just the leak, but it's the strategic leak because the face-to-face encounter with the very stubborn and reluctant commander-in-chief isn't working. Yeah. And that just particular element, again, I know that's happened in Washington a lot, but to happen at this level and to happen with Joe Biden, who has that famously, tight-lipped, we hear over and over again, inner circle has been really, really amazing to watch. It feels like all these little mini chapters that normally would come out in the book at the end of the election have just been spooling out in real time. And this may be the last time we have to read the, phrase, the mood in the White House was grim, or the mood in the Delaware beach house was grim.
Yeah.
Because we feel like we've been reading that now for 3 weeks in a row.
And also, just to go on to what Bryan was saying, his inner circle, too, is fraying. You start, like in my latest piece, a source close to the inner circle says Anita Dunn is no longer a part of the inner circle because she's taken a lot of flack for being a part of his inner circle. You notice that there's just breaking apart. Actually, it reminds me of covering the Trump White House, because when I covered the Trump White House, there were leaks all the time during every moment, because it was pure chaos. Everyone wondering if he was going to hang out from moment to moment to moment. And the weird thing is that on this campaign, there are really not that many leaks coming out of Trump's campaign. It's a much more professional, loyal, tight operation. And it's been this weird shift to see Biden world leaking like a sieve. And everyone in Biden world, like you would see the interpersonal clashes in Trump world. There was always people fighting. He had two chiefs of staff basically at the beginning with Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon. They were constantly warring the factions. And now Biden world has factions. And that's when you know it's bad.
Right. Well, and you had Tim Alberta on a couple podcasts ago, but he wrote that great piece about the Trump campaign, the one he's running this time versus what it was 8 years ago and 4 years ago, which I thought was really interesting. The Biden inner circle piece, it really seemed by the end, it was just his wife and his son. And that was what everybody was saying. Those are the two people he's listening to. And then it comes down to this, something that you see over and over again with people as they're trying to hold on their last pieces of power, and they're just turning to voices who are personally invested in them keeping that power, right? So for him, his wife wants to stay the first lady. It's great to be the first lady, right? The son, who has some legal issues coming, probably wants him to be president for all the obvious reasons. But they're just saying, no, it's fine. It's fine. Don't listen. They're trying to bring you down. And this ties into, Bryan, this whole kind of underdog thing that Biden's had forever, where he's always been the one counted out. He's always been rallying back. And you can see, like, even if he's a little bit diminished these days, which I think we can all agree that he is, like, he's still kind of sliding into that underdog role. It's almost like a WWE wrestler. Oh, this is my gimmick. This is my shtick. I'm the underdog who nobody believes in me. I'm going to fight back. I did it in South Carolina in 2020. And it's just, he's not that guy anymore.
It's totally right. Shoemaker texted me the other day and he said, Biden's trying to run a nobody believed in us campaign.
Right.
The problem was it included no Democrats either. And, none of the kind of, liberal media people that Democrats count on, at least in the Trump era, supporting the party, right? And sort of being opinion leaders in that phrase. Yeah, I think the Hunter Biden part of this is fascinating because, we read a little bit of the last, 24, 48 hours. Like, here's somebody who has, needless to say, a very complicated relationship with his father. And suddenly here he is at his father's elbow when his father is facing the ultimate political crisis, when they're trying to push him off the ticket, them being the Democrats. And he's the one going, no, Dad, don't do it, right? Let's stick tough. Let's stay here. I mean, that is an absolutely fascinating human story outside of all of the things that are happening in American politics right now.
Tara, one of the things I heard was that Biden, especially with like these 3-4 days off, as he's trying to figure out, am I going to stay in? Am I going to leave? What should be my strategy? And people that he trusts, he probably is running out of people that he trusts at this point, but they're telling him, if you're going to stay in, you've got to go all out. You've got to do a media blitz. You almost have to be like somebody who's like Tom Cruise promoting the new Mission Impossible movie. You've got to be absolutely everywhere, constantly trying to prove to people that you actually are super competent, that you actually are sharp on your feet, that this is all like people just trying to, they're misinterpreting stuff. Like, you can actually do this. You've got to get out there and really do it. And obviously he can't. But that was, I think, the only way he could have stayed in, because all the polls, all the evidence, the Democrats turning against him, there was really no other way to make up ground unless he proved that people were wrong about him. And I don't think they were. What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing is that every time he did do another interview, Lester Holt last Monday, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was literally just 6 days ago. Yeah. It was not a strong performance. He went on, I think he went on BET the next night. Another time, not a strong performance. Like, it's not like he was coming out there and hitting it out of the gate. I know he does well on teleprompter, and he had a few good rallies, and he had people literally chanting, like, stick it out, stick it in, like, stay in there, stay with us. And I'm sure that sort of gave him some hope and morale, but like, at the end of the day, no one was feeling different. And I know from my sourcing that they were feeling like, not enough people watch the George Stephanopoulos interview. It's not stemming the bleeding. What do we do? What do we do? And at one point, they even considered doing a national address because they needed to force the cameras on Biden so that he could get enough eyeballs. I think the point is that everyone watched that debate, and you're not going to get that visual out of your mind. You're not going to get what happened. You can't convince the voters at that point to think differently about him. And I don't think a blitz would have changed it. He basically prolonged the inevitable for about a month. I don't know that it did the party much good either. And now they're in this situation where they've got to figure it all out. I mean, he endorsed Kamala Harris. What does that mean, though?
Belatedly. He did a statement first, and then he did the endorsement of her afterwards, almost like either it was left out and intentionally or he forgot to do it. I don't know what the other reason. Why wouldn't that have been in the statement?
And it doesn't have the same gravity being in a statement versus being in a tweet. It's also just very weird to see him putting out a white paper at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I know earlier for you, announcing his withdrawal. I mean, to me, it seemed a bit odd. I would think that there would be,
you would have gone with like a YouTube channel selfie, like him just doing like a power walk with the phone out.
I don't know. I think maybe doing like a national address, which I guess he's going to do later, but. Yeah. I don't know. It just seemed, and on a Sunday, I thought maybe it would be.
I agree. I thought it was weird too. Why not just leak out that he's dropping out and then do the statement after? How would you handle it, Bryan?
Well, I do wonder if this whole speaks to just how few people are around him right now. That to me looked like the best we could do with 5 people around us, not wanting, the larger part of the White House apparatus or the Democratic Party apparatus to know before we announced it. Very short. Some of those sentences in there were kind of written like Biden talks. They were not written in, well, shall we say, formal presidential English. Yeah. It was just like a very interesting letter. And, I don't know if the sort of the twofer of I'm out, I'm endorsing Kamala, if that was him thinking that these are two separate decisions that he just wanted
maybe he just assumed. Yeah, because she's my VP and we got all the delegates and the money together that naturally, but wait, maybe I should actually just say that.
Well, I don't think he forgot. I just think he probably thinks that of this as two different things, right? This is a huge decision for me to leave the presidential race in late July. It's also a huge decision for me to do this, and maybe I'll just put them in two different statements. Why that makes sense, I don't know. But I think we
would have maybe advised him against that one.
Yeah, I think you just add a line in there saying, and I endorse my vice president, who I believe in.
Yeah, the party and the election is in great hands.
And one more thing.
Yeah, but P.S. Isn't it weird? Bryan and I are big like history buffs, and it's weird, growing up, especially when I was in my biggest political science history phase, like in college and after college, and you would read about some of the stuff that happened before you were alive, right? You'd read about like the Kennedy-Nixon debate and just what a transformative, important moment that was for everybody. Like in the moment, how something shifted, and then just people write about that and talk about it. The
TV candidate.
Yeah, and you see the video, and Nixon looks sweaty, and you're like, oh man, that must have been crazy. And some of the awful stuff that happened in the 60s, like, oh Jesus, can you imagine being there for that? And then you just think of all the stuff that happened in the last 4 weeks, and it's this big consequential stuff that people will be teaching in history classes, and they'll be writing about in books. And all of it was just happening in a row. And it was like in this content cycle that Bryan and I are in with sports and culture and everything else, where it's like, where's DeMar DeRozan going? And then, oh yeah, and this is also happening. And I don't know. I just feel like Bryan, I feel like I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like just like the weightiness of some of this stuff.
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean, it all felt, and again, and this is an election, that we were told was going to be kind of boring, for a couple months, and
right.
At least was very baked in. Right, here are two very familiar candidates, and then as you say, that whole thing starts 3.5 weeks ago. But yeah, that and it's also been, Bill, we should add, for political reporters, this is what they have been lusting after the entire time I've been in journalism. Right, like an open convention. We got to do it like Jack Germond did back in the day. It's like sports writers, where you just feel you just missed the golden age of sports writing.
Yeah.
Riding on the plane with Muhammad Ali and drinking with Mickey Mantle at the bar after the game. Political
flying coach with John Havlicek.
Totally, they feel
this is like heroin.
This is what it is. Yes.
I mean, I've never done heroin, but this is as high as I've ever felt.
Thank you for that political clarification.
Yeah. I've never done heroin, but I mean, compared to the other elections, because it's not like 2016 was like the most normal election, but this went from like kind of cruising along at its own pace, and everybody thought they knew who the two candidates were. But then, what were the last 6 weeks like just to cover this, Tara?
It's just been wild. I mean, I think we spoke while I was trying to take a vacation, but I just couldn't. I mean, I was just, I had to work. My phone died because I was using it so much and it was hard to resuscitate. But I've been on the phone with my sources every single day, waking up in the morning. Like for me, I hesitate to plan anything right now because I felt like something would happen at any moment. That was what I kept being told, that things were going to happen. So I've been in sort of a sense of standby for about the past month. And, sources coming out of nowhere, just people that are on the campaign being like, can we please talk? People who would reluctantly keep the company line, and just this feeling of like, at any moment, Biden is going to step down. And then just last week on Sunday, it's like whiplash. Trump is there's an attempted assassination attempt on a Sunday, same time as right now, by the way, maybe a few hours earlier. And again, it's like, wow, you really have to just be ready for anything at any moment. And who's to say what's going to happen next? I mean, yes, he has endorsed Kamala Harris, but who's to say that the full, bench of the Democratic Party, Wes Moore, Kamala Harris, right, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, they don't all come out there right now saying, I'm running against Kamala. Like, that's a huge story too. And you've got the entire Democratic Party figuring out, I'm texting with donors. They're like, we don't really know what's next. We're trying to figure it out. I don't think that they're all settled on Kamala Harris. There's more drama to come. And I'm afraid to sleep. Truly. I don't know what's going to happen next.
Tara mentioned how, Harris got the approval from Biden, but does that necessarily mean she's going to be the candidate? I would assume she is. And that I think there are own dangers of putting somebody who hasn't really been in this kind of spotlight, just throwing them in a couple months before the election. But one of the things that people have talked about, Bryan, with Harris is just like, people don't like her that much. She hasn't done that well in big elections. Like, what makes people think she's going to win? And then there's that other camp like, no, the last 4 years, she's learned a lot. She's been in the spotlight. She's been a good vice president. What do the next 6 weeks look like for her in your mind?
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, we're really in an interesting situation where, you're right. We don't know her as a national politician, and that's partly the doing of the Biden administration, which did not exactly want her to become a national politician after picking her as his running mate back in 2020. We do know she can be a good debater. She won her debate with Mike Pence in 2020. Obviously, the bar for having a good Democratic debate at this point is pretty much on the floor. So she figures if she and Trump do debate, and that seems like an if at this point, and everything seems like an if, she would obviously have a chance to fare much better than Biden did. But, like the next couple of days are going to be so interesting because, and Tara will be much more plugged in less than me, but you have to, I would think, have one of those big name Democrats actually step up and not just say, I want to be president, but I want to run against the vice president of the United States that Joe Biden just endorsed on his way out the door, which feels like a
and then
huge step
state why. They'd have to attack her at the same time in order to make that happen.
Well, I don't even really, because they talk about an open convention. I feel like I'm a relatively smart guy. I don't even 100% understand what that means. Like in my head, it's like, season 7 of The West Wing, where it's like, oh, it's Sorkin's writing an open convention and weird shit's going to happen. But what does this mean in practical terms in real life, Tara?
I think the rule book will be rewritten in some ways, but right now Biden has 3,886 delegates that are his. So about 4,000 Democratic delegates are out there because there were others randoms that picked up some delegates. And there's 700 super delegates too. I'm not entirely sure the difference, but I think that it will come down to a vote. And in the meantime, if they are numerous candidates, they're going to have to run campaigns. They're going to have to lobby the delegates. There might be some like deals and trades done on the floor of the convention to get them to vote one way or another.
Yeah, but how does that help if they're trying to beat Trump? How does having like one giant long cat fight to try to get the nomination and just chewing up time? I don't know how that helps.
I agree with you. I think there's also another thinking that if you anoint Kamala Harris, doesn't seem democratic enough. Some people might argue that he's like passing it down to her. And so that will be the argument against her. The argument for her will be that, she is his vice president. I think the other argument, obviously, is that she represents a core constituency of the Democratic Party. She's an African-American woman. They consistently come out for Democrats. And to pass her over as the historic first vice president, the first African-American female vice president, would be seen as a severe, diss or slight against this huge core constituency. But, people say she's got to earn it. And if she earns it, she'll come out an even stronger candidate. I think ultimately, and I'm an optimist on this, I do think that people will be more excited than they were before about the idea of Biden and Trump running against each other. At least the Democratic base might be excited to have a candidate, or just Democratic voters in general, that a candidate that's under 81 years old, and will come out of this convention.
Finish sentences.
Yeah, and then maybe they'll come out of this convention with a shiny new toy, someone we know of or didn't think of, and they market that person one way or another. These people haven't really been vetted, though. Some of them, probably Kamala has been vetted the most. Yeah, when you think about it. But like Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, they're governors, popular governors. But I think the thinking right now is that if you really want to be strategic, like truly strategic, you should add a battleground state governor to the ticket, either with Kamala, that's someone like Gretchen Whitmer, who's of Michigan, or Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, the 2 states you really have to win as a Democrat to win this election. Either or, but usually if you get one, you get the other.
Arizona's a possibility too, right?
Yeah, Mark Kelly is very popular. He's a combat veteran, very, very popular. He's being talked about, or have one at the top of the ticket. I think the thinking of I know, Gavin Newsom is a star in the party and he's obviously ambitious, but having two West Coasters on the ballot doesn't really make sense. And really we're down to the point where it really only matters in 7, 8 states right now. And if you want to win this, you got to win the battleground states. So why not pick a popular battleground governor?
Bryan, if you were the czar of this, what decision would you hand down?
The GM of common sense of the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah. The GM.
The Midwest argument to me is really the most compelling one. It's just like that you need to win those states, right? Like if you lose Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania, you probably lose the election. And so I would say whether it's in the VP slot, whether it's Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, whether it's at the top of the ticket, that to me is the absolute must. The one thing I would look for in a Democratic candidate, other than somebody, as we say, who is vetted enough to run a national election now at hyperspeed.
Yeah, the thing that scares me about Kamala is that her campaign 4 years ago was so bad. I remember who wrote the giant feature about how bad it was after, was it Politico? Somebody wrote the Now They Tell Us feature about everything that went wrong and it was just one of the worst campaigns anyone's run in the last 20 years. So that part I can't, maybe everybody gets better, everybody grows.
That's always,
But
yeah, that's always used against her. That's like
it was
that's
bad.
the main hit against her. Right.
The last 5 weeks though, the thing that, you know, I always like to look at things from what does the other side want to happen, right? And it just felt, and everybody's made this point, but it just felt like Trump really wanted Biden to stay in the race.
He was goading him.
He was doing that, you know, he did some stuff on Truth Social, but that's such like a, you know, that's kind of where he's like Trump unleashed. But in public, he was just kind of laying back. And even during the debate, you could see there were a couple times where he could have really gone for the kill. And he's just like, I'm just going to let this guy hang himself here. So the fact that he so badly wanted Biden to stay in the race, and then Tim Alberta in that piece, that we, you know, they basically revealed that's our big strategy is we basically just want Biden to stay in. So now that he's out, what are we prepared for with Trump? Because it feels like he's been intentionally calm. Now what happens?
It depends on who the candidate is. I mean, we read in the New York Times today that they're ready, you know, for Kamala Harris, as you'd expect them to be ready. You know, that's Oppo research that's right at their fingertips. You know, they've had talking points on her about the border, you know, a task Biden assigned her to early in her term, another data point for what the Biden administration thought of Kamala Harris and how visible they wanted her to be. You know, that stuff is all ready to me. But I would think, and Tara will have a better read on this, that there's just a lot of uncertainty in Trump headquarters today because Biden was a great known for them, right? He had a terrible weakness that he had no way of reversing, that he could do nothing about. It was exactly the game plan they ran against Biden on in 2020, by the way. They were calling him old and running a basement campaign then. He was 4 years older. He had the terrible debate. He had that moment Americans could not erase. So, you know, to me, that's just like when you inject unknown into a political campaign in July.
That you're winning.
The ticket, not in the vice presidential slot like we're used to. Yeah, and you're ahead. You've just had this convention that you feel pretty good about other than Trump's speech, which was as long as Oppenheimer. I would think that they would, you know, be at least a little rattled right now.
Yeah, the fear in football, and a few people have made this point, but in football, we see this with quarterbacks sometimes where the starting quarterback's not quite good enough, and there becomes the groundswell for the backup. And a lot of times the backup's either worse or it's just, you know, you're just chewing up time, but you're going nowhere anyway. But this is like one of the great kind of football things over the years. It's like, I don't really like this guy. This guy, if we could only put in this guy, it'll be great. And now we're actually seeing this in real time happen this in politics, which I can't. The last time somebody dropped out when they were an incumbent was LBJ in 1968. That was before I was alive. I've just never seen this. I don't know how this plays out. We don't really have anything to compare it to because it's stupid to compare it to like Polk and Buchanan and all these people from, you know, it's a completely different atmosphere. If you had to make any predictions, Tara, for the next 4 weeks, give me like two things that you feel confident will happen.
I mean, there's going to be like real serious discussions about money and how does it get to Harris and her campaign? Because, you know, Biden, even before the debate, was coming in at a deficit. Okay. Yeah. $30 million cash on hand deficit to Trump. He does have the biggest war chest. How do they move it over to Biden? There's going to be lots of lawsuits coming from the RNC saying you can't just roll that money over to her. You can't put it in a super PAC. There are going to be tons of lawsuits going on. I think like, I'm going to be watching to see movements from the other camps. How quickly does the party consolidate around Harris? I mean, to be honest, like when I was speaking with, you know, senior, you know, Hill sources, it was like they really hadn't made up their mind on how this should go forward. They really did not know if it should just be Kamala and the whole party rallies around and anoints her, or if they allow this open primary and this open process, as they called it. And, you know, I'm going to be looking for smoke signals from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to see what they tell the party to do, because I think the voices that you're going to hear from the electeds, whether they come out and say, we want an open process versus like, we believe Kamala is our choice, it might create another sort of war between the Congressional Black Caucus, maybe frontliners, Democratic frontliners, those people that come from battleground states, swing districts, and you're going to see polling. Like, how is she really doing up against Trump? Because the New York Times had a poll last week that showed her really only up 1 point against Trump, pretty much at the same levels that Biden was at, in the margin of error, give or take. So you're going to see leaking polls come out in the next week or so about how Kamala really fares. You're going to see a lot of polls about how Gretchen does, about how Josh Shapiro does, Wes Moore. Everybody, there's going to be a lot of leaking and fighting. And I wish I could predict exactly what's going to happen, but I think the knives are still out. And
yeah, like what happens if there's a poll that Whitmer and Shapiro are by far the best combo to actually defeat Trump? Like, here's what all the data says. If we do this, this is how we win. Or you could stay down the road you're going. Yeah, Bryan,
there's
you agree
already
with that?
a Kamala campaign happening. So,
yeah. Do you think the knives will stay out, Bryan?
Oh, it is. And, look, the people that maneuvered Biden off the ticket now have to, A, help pick a Democrat to replace him, and B, try to carry that Democrat over the finish line. Because, for Nancy Pelosi,
in 4 months.
Right, for Chuck Schumer, for George Clooney, right, for this whole constellation of people that got together and said, we have to do this unprecedented thing. Now they're going to be looked at, okay, we did it. Now what do we do? Now, how do we win? You got us to this place. Now, how do we win? And that to me is going to be fascinating, because these are the people who, again, pulled off this switch in midstream that we've never seen before, never in the modern age anyway. And now they have to figure out what the next move is.
Well, and then the other piece of that, look, I mean, there's always distrust with politics, right? But if you're on the Democratic side and you're just looking at how they've handled not just the last couple of weeks and months, but really the last year and a half, 2 years, where they had this scenario that they knew was coming in 2024. And they're doing stuff to, they're kind of hiding Biden. Like, to borrow a sports analogy, it's like the quarterback where you're only having him make the throws that he can make. And they're just, some of the stuff that even has come out in the past 3-4 months about how he's had less cabinet meetings than just about anybody. And it just feels like they've been very carefully shielding him from being out there too much. And now it seems like with reason. So that, to me, just watching from afar, it feels like there's real distrust now with the whole party. How do they win that back? How do they make people feel like, well, wait, you guys just did this for the last 18 months. Why should we trust you now? What are the steps to fix that?
It's a really, really good question, because and a lot of people argue that they've lost the moral argument, right, against Trump because of this. Because they've, for so long, told everyone it's okay. But privately, they've been like, let's just get him over the finish line. Just get our 81-year-old candidate, amble him over, whatever it takes. So that's hard. And that's another argument for having a primary and not making it seem like the party poobahs picked her. That's exactly what the Republicans are already saying, that they cheated. This was rigged. They were always going to say it was rigged. Doesn't matter. We know that. But they're going to say if Kamala Harris is picked, that this is just, the Democrats trying to, I think they're actually using the word cheat at this point.
Yeah.
And it's not democratic. Like, they're the ones who are supposedly, the preservers of democracy. Well, look at them just picking a candidate that the delegates didn't even vote for. And so that's the narrative that they have to fight against. And that's another argument for having an open process. Now, the Republicans were always going to say that the election was rigged. That's what they do, as we saw in 2020. But I don't know. I mean, I spoke to Trump's political director last week, and he claims, we're ready for any generic D, essentially any generic Democrat. But I don't believe that. It's really hard to change a campaign, especially with only 4 months left. Like you said, the entire thing has been predicated around Biden. I really think Kamala could beat him as well. I think basically pretty much like any Democratic candidate, not any, but he's not that may have been their victory party at the RNC. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
He's in for something, and they know that. And I wonder what they're thinking right now. I know they've already started attacking Kamala Harris and they started attacking Gretchen Whitmer, but they're
probably, the list is going to get
strategic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bryan, what happens if it's the reverse? If Trump names Don Jr. as his vice president. And he's going down the road. He gets all this money. He gets delegates. And then last minute, it's like, I'm actually not running. I'm going to hand all this stuff over to Don Jr. People probably would have been like, you're cheating. Right?
Yeah. I'm not sure Don Jr. was going to win an electoral college majority. Don Jr. may have some unvetted things in his past that we haven't quite explored as a nation. No, and just to Tara's point, I would think, there are a lot of anti-Trump elements in the universe that desperately want to beat Donald Trump in November and have had a hard time getting excited because they've got the wrong guy at the head of the ticket. So I think the Democrats' hope will be that whoever they pick, whether it's Kamala, whether it's somebody else, that there is an immediate galvanizing moment that says, okay, finally, somebody, the money comes in quickly, the enthusiasm goes up. Now, again, the Biden camp's losing argument was anybody but Trump was going to get it done, right? Door number one, Trump. Door number two, somebody else. It didn't work. But the Democrats will hope that just having somebody else, Donald Trump's never won the popular vote, just having somebody else on the ballot will help them win in November.
I think it could be a unifying moment. I personally do. I think it could be good for the Democrats.
You're a glass half full person. Look at you. It's definitely going to be something. It's either going to be a unifying moment or it's going to be a disaster. I feel like those are the only options yet.
Yeah, how bad was the last 3 weeks for the Democrats? I mean, it could not possibly be. We don't think anyway. You say that here.
Well, they'll be fighting and then they will rise up again, I think. Or maybe not. They have to get their shit together, though, soon. The more this drags out, the worse it is for the party.
One of the many parallels with sports and politics is we talk about legacy a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The legacy of this, the legacy of that, legacy of this guy's career. And with Biden, that was a word that got thrown around a bunch last 3.5 weeks, right? What do you want your legacy to be?
You have a chance to be a hero.
Yeah, you have a chance
to do the right thing. Just the reverse psychology of this whole last 3 weeks was hilarious because we don't want to pressure Biden. We don't say, sir, you must stand aside. We want to, and this was included a lot of people who worked for Obama and other administrations say, sir, you have a chance to do something great here.
Right.
So just step aside and let somebody else try to win the race.
Yeah, because if you're just talking about career moves, there's 3 options, right? He steps aside and Democrats win and everybody goes, awesome, Joe Biden, man, he's a true patriot till the end. The second version is he does that and they lose anyway, but they would have lost with him. And then the third version is he stays in, gets trounced by Trump, and that becomes the first thing mentioned in any sentence about him is that he stayed too long. But it is like, I do think one of the things about this, and you think about other aspects of life, is the whole concept of people not wanting to give up power and people not knowing when to leave. And you see this, like I saw this happen with David Stern in the NBA, where he probably stayed like 2-3 years too long, right? And the last couple of years, Adam Silver was ready to take over and he just didn't want to leave. And there was some really rocky, I remember writing like a really kind of semi-scathing column about him at one point during that, because it was just clear, like it was time for him to go. It was time for him to pass the league to somebody else. And you see that with, Ginsburg. You see it with Lorne Michaels right now in SNL. Is it time for him to go? Is it not time? Should he stay until he's 90? When do you leave? And I think for a lot of people, it's the part of life that we don't maybe spend enough time talking about is when is your exit? It's always better to be a year too early than 2 years too late, right? It feels like with Biden, the move in retrospect should have been a year ago to be like, well, wait a second. I can't be the president when I'm 86. I'm already not the same guy I was in 2020. I should start thinking about the party now. Who am I passing this to? We got to set this up. We got to do this correctly. But he didn't do it. And I think win or lose, that's going to be a huge part of his legacy after this. Correct, Tara, or you disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, his whole argument the entire time was I was the only one who could beat Trump, right? I beat him in 2020.
Which is something Trump would say.
Before. He sounded like Trump, especially towards the end in his defiance from that leaked video that my colleague Julia Yaffe had with the House Democrats. He was like, I'm the best leader on foreign policy. Name me one other leader who is as good on NATO as I am. It was like the defiance, the way he thought of himself. It was showing this level of like egomania that I think is personally distasteful and showed, his colleagues, his Democratic colleagues, they were furious about it. They thought, who is this monster? And it's like, really, I think people are going to look back on it and think he should have gotten out of this race weeks ago. And his indecision was a drag on the party because now they've got a lot to do.
Any last thoughts, Bryan?
Well, yeah, you go back to, October 2022, which is when Donald Trump announced he was going to run for president again, right? So then that activates the Trump stopper urges in Biden. He's running. So I got to run again. The Democrats do a little bit better than they thought during the midterms. And so all of a sudden he's in. And then he has to face this terrible choice. What if me, the guy who stopped Trump, whose entire political identity is the guy who's going to let Trump back into the White House? And that's certainly what's been rattling around his mind the last 3 weeks. And here we are.
Mm-hmm.